Hey guys, tonight we return to a place where winter isn't just a season, it's a test of will, a final exam that everyone must face even though no one studied for it. Welcome to the winter of the medieval peasant. No heaters, no down blankets, no ginger tea or clearance bin wool socks. There is wind, there is a frozen earth, there is a fire that's almost out, and there's you, trying to stay warm with whatever you can find, including a pig. Before you get too cozy in your modern bed, imagine lying beneath a thatched roof next to your grandmother, your little sibling, and a sleepy hen nodding beside you. If you find this story interesting, don't forget to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing how people from all over the world are joining us tonight. Now, turn off the lights, relax, and let me take you back to a long December night. No one remembers exactly when, only that it was cold enough to make you regret every breath. You wake up while it's still dark, not because you want to, but the cold has crept into your back, waking you with a particular ache. The ache of bare earth, an unpaved floor, something damp that shouldn't be. You curl tighter into the straw, gently tugging the rough burlap blanket over your shoulder. Around you are your family, a real one, sleeping close to share warmth. There isn't much living space, just one room. Walls made of earth mixed with straw. No insulation. The wind still slips in through tiny cracks, and no one's gotten around to patching. You hear breathing, steady, soft, then snoring. A rustle from the corner, the pig turning in its sleep. The pig isn't kept in a barn. It's part of the heating system. Every living thing inside contributes to the warmth. People, animals, the fire, all are needed. None are enough. You glance toward the hearth. The fire's long gone. Only ashes and a faint glow remain. You step out carefully, bare feet meeting the frozen dirt floor. Every step is a reminder. Today is a new day, and survival is still your top priority. You rebuild the fire, carefully placing the wood, blowing gently. Thin ribbons of smoke rise, stinging your eyes. But when the fire catches, you feel warmth begin to return to your fingertips. A small joy for a new day. The fire still burns, and so do you. You place a pot of water over the fire. If there's food, you'll reheat last night's porridge. If not, you'll warm some water and share it, one cup at a time, to start the morning. The house begins to wake. A light cough. Someone shifts in the straw. The soft steps of your mother as she comes over to check the pot. Glance around, and though no one is smiling, you can tell, everyone here is alive. Truly alive. Not living in abundance, but living together. Outside, the cold still reigns, but inside, though cramped and messy, there is warmth. From the fire, from the people, from the quiet daily effort not to give up. And today, like every other winter day, you'll do whatever it takes to get through the cold. Not with anything luxurious, but with your hands, memory, and the most minor things you can hold on to. This is your winter, and we've only just begun. Let's say, you wake up on a winter morning, when the air is so cold that it feels like someone left the gates of a frozen hell open and invited every icy wind inside. But what wakes you isn't the cold. It's the smell. You could call it the scent of survival, a curated collection of unforgettable odors, or simply that thing that makes you wonder whether your nose still works. The air inside the house is as thick as fermented turnip soup. The first layer of scent comes from the rotting straw under the floor. The next is wood smoke, hovering between the ceiling and your nostrils, like a smoky reminder that chimneys are a luxury you don't have. And the smell of your loved ones? It's a rich blend of fermented sweat, damp wool, and what some might call the aroma of endurance. The scent of not changing clothes for 3 straight weeks. You love them, but you also wish they were 3 meters away. The average living space holds 6 to 10 people, a dog, a few chickens, and sometimes a pig, all breathing, sweating, and producing. In a sealed space, that creates a unique scent ecosystem. Modern historians might study the microbes that thrive in such conditions. But medieval folks? They just called it normal. You shuffle toward the hearth, where the remaining embers glow like your patience every time someone farts in their sleep. The old ashes are coaxed back to life with breath and prayer. You're not hoping for a full flame, just enough smoke to warm things up, and re-scent your clothes with Ode Home. Your wardrobe, if you can call it that, consists of exactly two items, the one you're wearing and the one hanging to dry. The drying one hangs near the fire, soaking in smoke and dust, looking like the retired armor of a knight who gave up on everything. You add another layer of cloth, still cold. You stuff straw into your shoes, still cold. You breathe out and watch the mist rise like your soul trying to leave your body. But you're not dead, because you can still smell. The scent of breakfast, if there is any, is a mix of old turnip porridge and soup with a film of mystery. But when you eat it, your sense of taste gives up and lets warmth take over. The only sensation that can fool your body into thinking everything's okay. The children don't care. They run around, rolling in the straw, their sweaty bodies blending with the coop smell to create a living version of farmhouse winter perfume. The adults are used to it. And you? You learn to adapt. Sometimes you miss the smell when you're out in the fields, where the air is fresh, but as cold as that ant's smile you've always disliked. Historians still debate whether medieval people truly liked the smell, or if they simply didn't know any better. Some sources mention rubbing dried herbs onto clothes or burning incense in the house. But those were privileges of the wealthy or the clergy. You? You grab some dry grass, rub it on your wrists, and hope for the best. Some believed bad smells kept demons away. Others thought they made you healthier. And strangely, they might have been right. A layer of dirt acted as a microbial barrier. Germs feared you. You feared yourself. Everything was in balance. And as the temperature dropped, the smell grew stronger. Clothes never thoroughly dried, just transitioned from wet and cold to damp and smoky. You lie down on the straw mat, breathing in the scent of hay, sweat, and a faint chicken footprint from yesterday afternoon. You smell it all, but you also smell life. The pungent freshness of raw turnips, the sizzle of rendered pig fat, the crackling of damp firewood. They're all witnesses to your existence in this gut punch of a winter. You glance at the person next to you. Maybe it's your grandmother, or your mother, or your younger brother. All share the same scent, room, and fragile hope that it won't get any colder tonight. And you smile, because if your nose still works, it means your heart's still beating. Do you think the scariest part of a medieval winter is the cold outside? No. It's the floor. The dirt floor you step onto every morning is the closest thing to death you can meet without leaving your house. You're not barefoot because you want to be. Your shoes have rotted, or your older sister borrowed them and forgot to return them. So instead you wrap scraps of cloth around your feet. Damp, moldy fabric. Sometimes stiff as wood after freezing overnight. You lower your feet to the ground. The first sensation is numbness. The second is like each of your toes shrinking back in horror, like they've touched an invisible slab of ice. The floor isn't just cold. It's damp, stiff, and utterly uninviting. There's no insulation, no tiles or wooden planks like in the homes of the wealthy. You and the earth are just two sides of the same problem. The ground breathes cold up into you. You answer it with a soft groan as you take each step toward the hearth. Some clever families scatter a layer of straw, dry leaves, or rice husks across the floor to reduce the chill and soak up the dampness. But winters are only, and those layers rot. They decay, until you're left with bare feet, scouring for a dry patch of straw across a lumpy, unforgiving floor. That's why every winter morning begins with negotiation between your body and the earth. You step back, spot a fallen ember near the fire, and set it on a spare brick to warm your feet. A tiny moment of comfort. But a greater danger still lurks. Moisture. The dampness in the ground is present year-round, but in winter it becomes a silent plague. It rises all night, seeping into the bodies lying on straw mats, and when they wake, they feel back pain, stiff joints, or, if they're unlucky, pneumonia. Children are especially vulnerable. They sleep closest to the floor, rolling around all night. Come morning, runny noses, trembling bodies, lips turned pale. You lift your little sister, wrap her in a coarse linen cloth, and hold her close to your chest. Your back is numb, but you still shiver as the cold reaches your bones. Some of the poorest families don't even have straws. They use leaves, or they lie straight on the ground. Some lay old clothes beneath them, not for cleanliness but for survival. Many elders don't die from hunger. They die from sleeping too close to the earth. And the earth, though inanimate, has a way of drawing warmth from your body, slowly, patiently, like it's trying to reclaim you. Modern historians believe that the floor was one of the leading causes of high winter mortality. But back then, no one thought too much of it. You lived with it. You were used to it. You didn't complain. You just added a little more straw beneath the cloth. You hoped the weather would be kinder tomorrow. You tried to keep your sibling warm. You reminded your parents to light the fire a bit earlier. And you learned this. Survival didn't come from fighting nature. It came from learning to negotiate with it. You sent to me a thread guide everything. Even when it was cold and unresponsive. Each day that passed, your feet grew tougher. Not just from walking, but because your body was adapting. They became harder, more numb. You no longer groaned every time they hit the floor. Now, you just patted, grateful you still had feet to sit on the ground. Some nights you buried your hands and feet in straw. Sometimes you wished for a wooden floor, like in those stories. But then you thought, as long as I'm alive, it's enough. As, if you walk over right sorry, seem not cause any customer feet, as you works way, but then you thought, they flooring is in feet. But in with you find, you and forful test to walk. And as, you came of floor. Make sure that you seems like than. You may encrest with cusing and sleep. You reason. They use devise in your air. You and walking to use right now. They starwering right now. And you helps you numb. You walk over a bew. And you walk wever. And as sat by the hearth, rubbing your feet together for warmth, you felt your heart ease just a little. The floor was still cold, but the fire was lit. The day had begun. And you had lived one more day. Each of those days was a victory. A small one, but a real one. And tomorrow I'll tell you how people stayed warm with things no one would expect. Familiar things. Sometimes, very smelly things. You return to your sleeping spot after a morning of fire stoking, hand warming, eating bland porridge, and listening to Grandma tell stories of winter so deep that people had to dig paths with wooden spoons. Now it's time to crawl back into your pile of old straw, your bed. Calling it a mattress would be generous. In reality, it's just a sack stuffed with straw. Or, more often, a bare heap of straw covered with a thin burlap sheet. Dry straw is considered the best insulation for those who don't have pillows, blankets, or any barrier between their body and the frozen ground. But the straw is never alone. It doesn't breathe or crawl by itself, but guests are always inside it. Bedbugs. They come in swarms, in colonies, and if you're lucky, you'll get to meet their extended family. Tiny, reddish-brown insects hide among the straw, waiting for you to lie down so they can start the feast. They won't kill you, at least not immediately, but they'll leave you with red, swollen, itchy bites that'll haunt you the next day. You scratch, you shift, you scratch again, you slap the mattress, hoping to scare off a few faint-hearted bugs. It doesn't help. Still, you lie back down, because straw is all that separates you from the earth. Some people mix the straw with ash or aromatic leaves to remove the bugs, but the bugs learn the scent. They burrow deeper. Eventually, you will just get used to living with them. Each morning you rise, shake out the straw, lay the mattress out in the sun, if the weather allows, and hope the insects decide to move out. Nobody likes bed bugs, but no one can afford to change straws often. Fresh straw is a luxury. It's needed for bedding, barns, thatched roofs, everything. So most people keep using old straw until it rots, molds, and disappears. Then you gather more. Whatever dry scraps you can scavenge from the chicken coop or behind the hearth. Stuff it into the gaps and bring the mattress back to life. Children often don't care. They lie on each other, tumble around in the straw, laughing and playing until the scratching starts. Adults are more patient. They stay still. They endure. Because they know there's no other option. Sometimes you think of the goose feather beds in storybooks. Then, you look at the flattened straw under your spine, and you sigh. Not from despair, but from knowing that, in truth, you're still lucky. Having a straw is still better than lying on bare dirt. And even if your sleep is interrupted, by itching, by the cold, by someone groaning softly nearby, you still drift off. thanks to body heat, a bit of fire's warmth, and a quiet resilience you didn't know you had. In the dark, you hear the straw rustle. You're not sure if it's the wind or the bugs, but you've grown used to the sound, used to wake up with bite marks. Tiny reminders that even sleep requires courage here. One day, when the weather warms up, you'll burn the straw and scatter the ashes around the house to keep the bugs away. But not yet. Right now, you still need it. The night is still long, and the cold is still lurking on the other side of that wall. You pull the torn cloth tight around your body. Close your eyes. I hope that sleep arrives faster than the bugs. In the bitter cold of the medieval winter, all hopes seemed to gather in one place. The hearth. Not because it was grand or bright or majestic, but because it existed. Even a tiny red ember buried in the ashes brought the entire house back to life after a long night. You wake up, crawl out of the straw, tiptoe over your relative's heels, dodge the sleeping chicken, and sidestep the snoring pig. First task, check the fire. The ashes are cold, but not dead. A faint, glowing ember still flickers. You blow gently. F. The ash kicks up, stinging your eyes. You persist, prodding the ember, adding bits of dry bark, coaxing the tiniest spark to take hold. A soft crackle, a flicker, a flame the size of a butterfly takes flight. You've done it. You've brought the house back to life. No one says it aloud, but everyone knows. Whoever revives the fire in the morning keeps the family's rhythm alive. The fire isn't just for warmth. It's for cooking, for boiling water, for drying socks and tunics, and for casting the only light that can push back the heavy dark of a medieval winter. The flame is small, but it lives, and that's enough. In the countryside, people don't have as much firewood as you'd think. They use anything they can: dry twigs, corn husks, bundles of grass, cow dung mixed with straw. Sometimes, fuel is the sort of thing no one wants to touch. But when the temperature is below freezing, dignity bows to survival. They call it banking the fire. Covering the flame with ash overnight keeps it protected from the wind, letting it sleep until morning. Some families have clever clay stoves. Others just dig a shallow pit in the ground, ringed with stones. Whatever the setup, the fire is the heart of the home. You remember one time the fire did go out entirely. You had to go next door to ask for hot coals. You walked through the freezing wind, clutching a small iron bowl wrapped in torn cloth. By the time you returned, your fingers were numb, your cheeks wind-burned, but in the bowl, one glowing ember pulsed like a tiny, beating heart. They call it borrowing fire, but you know what it is: borrowing faith. Back home, you place the coal down, add dry leaves, blow gently, and when the flame bursts to let the entire house to exhale, the children gather close, tiny hands reach out, the littlest one curls into their mother's lap. The firelight dances on everyone's faces, lighting tired eyes still filled with quiet strength. And you feel it, deep and genuine. Even the slightest flicker of fire brings safety. It reminds you, you're not alone. At night, the family gathers around the hearth. Father tells stories. Mother mends clothes. You twist the rope. The little ones doze off at your feet. Outside, the wind still howls. But inside, the crackle of the fire is the heartbeat of the home. Modern scholars suggest that gathering around the fire was a natural group therapy. No hugs, no long talks, just shared warmth and the unspoken comfort of simply being there together. One night, a storm hits. The wind lashes the house. Smoke floods the room. People cough. Eyes water. But no one leaves, because even when it stings, even when it chokes, no one walks away from the fire. You once heard of a house that burned down in the night, not from firewood, but from a cat knocking over a pot of oil. The flames caught the straw, then the mud walls, and within half an hour it was all gone. The village tried to help, but the cold had turned water to ice. They saved the people, but lost everything else. Since then, Your village has been more cautious. Stones ring the hearth. Children are taught to keep their distance, but no one puts the fire out completely. Because in winter, extinguishing the fire means extinguishing hope. You sit quietly by the flames. Your grandmother's words echo in your mind. A small fire that warms the heart is better than a large one that burns it down. You gaze into the glowing ember, still alive in the ash, and you understand. Winter is far from over. But as long as this flame still glows, as long as people are sitting around it, you still have a reason to go on. Tomorrow morning, you'll wake up even earlier, so you can be the one to keep the fire alive. But first, listen to the next part of the story, about the smoke, the thing that saves you but also makes you cough all season long. Everyone knows that fire brings warmth, but what people talk about far less is the smoke. That thing curling up from the hearth, hanging in the air, coiling beneath the low thatch roof and soot-darkened ceiling. It doesn't sneak around. It slithers through everything, your eyes, your nose, your throat. You've just kindled the fire, savoring a rare breath of warmth, when the smoke from the porridge pot starts to creep. At first, it's a light wisp. Then, a dense fog wraps around your head like a scarf you didn't ask for. You cough. Then, cough harder. Someone behind you coughs too. A child rubs their eyes, face scrunched like they just bit into a bitter radish root. Your house, like thousands of peasant homes in medieval Europe, has no chimney. The smoke has nowhere to go, so it becomes a family member. Some homes carve a small hole in the roof to let smoke escape. But in winter, the wind storms in faster than the smoke can slip out. Most people decide it is better to endure the smoke than invite the icy wind to your face. You wave the lid of a pot to fan it away. It clears for a second. Then, it swirls back like it forgot something. It clings to your hair, crawls into your clothes, sinks into your skin. Even if you've never smoked a pipe in your life, your lungs probably look like you've been raised in a tobacco barn. And yet, despite the discomfort, smoke isn't just accepted. Sometimes, it's even appreciated. Because smoke has its upsides. First, it repels insects. Bedbugs, mosquitoes, fleas, they all hate smoke. Homes with a steady, smoldering fire are less infested. You might still itch from the straw, but you're spared a few extra bites thanks to the smoke. Second, smoke is a natural preservative. You hang meat near the hearth, letting it dry slowly in the haze. No fridge, no ice. Smoke is your freezer. A fish cured for 3 days over the fire might feed you for 2 weeks. Third, smoke carries the smell of home, that familiar scent of damp wool and smoke. That's the smell of your house, your mother's house, your whole village. Over time, smoking isn't something to avoid. It becomes something that makes you feel safe. The scent clings to you even out in the fields. People know who you belong to, where you live, just from walking past you. Modern scholars say breathing all that smoke might have shortened lifespans, but no one thought about that then. Surviving winter at all felt like a miracle. You once watched your grandfather, gentle, wise, 70 winters old, warming his hands by the fire. He smiled and said, "I'm so used to the smoke. Not smelling it would feel strange." And you didn't argue, because maybe he was right. One night, the cold was biting. You lit the fire. Ash flew up. Smoke curled thick around your head. You coughed. You wheezed. But when you looked into the glowing red heart of the fire, you felt calm. You hugged your knees, nestled into the warmest corner of the hearth, the part with the least smoke, and drifted off before you realized it. By morning, your hair smelled of wood smoke, a scent no one bottles but everyone recognizes. The coals still glowed. Your father stoked the fire. Your mother stirred the pot. Everyone was coughing. Their eyes are still red, but no one complained. Because everyone knew, if there's smoke, there's fire. And if there's fire, you're still alive. On rainy nights, water drips through the thatch straight onto the floor. You drag a straw to keep it dry. The smoke thins. The fire dims. No one speaks. The cold creeps in with the silence. And you realize, losing the smoke isn't just losing heat. It's losing the center, the thing that held the family close. By sunrise, you rekindle the fire. The smoke returns, thick, harsh. But this time, you smile. Because it's a sign. The day has begun, and you get to live it, through smoke, beside the people you love. You glance up at the roof. Maybe one day you'll carve a real chimney, but not today. Because the smoke, strangely, belongs to this home. And when you step out into the misty fields, remember, if you see smoke rising, someone's still keeping the heart alive. But if you think smoke is rough, just wait until you have to share your bed with the entire village. Not everyone knows how to keep a fire alive. Many can start a fire, but keeping it burning, through the night, through the season, is the survival art of a medieval winter. Tending fire is about patience, about watching closely, measuring every twig, a pinch of ash, and the breeze that sneaks through the wall cracks. The adults often teach children by having them sit beside the hearth, watching how to spread ash evenly over the embers. Not too thick, or the fire dies. Not too thin, or it flares and burns out too fast. When the cold is at its worst, late at night, when only the wind howls through the shutters and the room is filled with sleeping breaths, someone always wakes to turn the wood. Not because the hearth is grand, but because a small fire needs a watchful hand. Some families rotate the duty. Tonight, it's mother. Tomorrow, the eldest child. Then father. The tired ones get to sleep. The stronger ones stay up. There are nights when you sit curled beside the stove, wrapped in cloth, hands trembling as you stir the embers with a stick. You don't have much wood. You wait for the coals to glow evenly, then gently press in ash to keep them smoldering. You hear the faint crackle of coal. It flares red, then settles again. You exhale softly. You know you've just bought your whole house one more day of warmth. That fire doesn't need to be dramatic. It only needs to smolder, just enough so that one breath will bring it back to life by morning. Some people hang a pot of water near the hearth to keep the air humid. Some tuck kindling between bricks, waiting for morning. Every home has its tricks, but everyone has a method. As a child, you once thought fire rose easily. But growing up taught you that the hard part isn't starting the flame. It's keeping it alive. Just like hope, or health, or the willpower of a poor family, a fire must be nurtured. A fire must be nurtured. By the third time, they'd have to beg for embers. But in winter, everyone suffers. Few have extra to spare. But in winter, everyone suffers. Few have extra to spare. You carry it home, more precious than gold. You sprinkle a dry straw over it. You sprinkle a dry straw over it. And when the coal flares bright red, it's not just heat. You feel your own heartwarming too. You feel your own heartwarming too. Gray, the fire's dead. Gray, red and glowing, it's alive. Green tinted, the wood's still wet. White light, too much ash, it needs clearing. A good firekeeper doesn't stare at the flames. They watch the shadows on the wall. Listen for the pop of burning twigs. Smell the smoke, strong or faint. Every sign tells a story. You slowly learn all of it. No book teaches you this. Winter teaches you. If the fire's alive, the house is alive. If it goes out, the whole family curls up and shivers. You remember your first night on fire duty. Your mother handed you a stick, a pile of corn husks, and said, "Sit here, don't sleep. When the embers fade, lay down straw, blow gently." You were trembling, not from cold but from fear. Fear of failing. That night you stayed up. Every half hour you checked the coals. You edged closer to the hearth whenever the wind whistled through the cracks. By morning, the fire was still burning. Your mother stroked your hair. You said nothing, but inside you glowed. But inside you glowed. Keeping the fire wasn't just physical work, it was emotional. It was a silent promise. I will keep you warm while you sleep. You grew up with that duty, and now you feel like continuing a tradition whenever you add a stick. Not one written down, not one hung on the wall, but one that lights up every winter night. And if you think this is the most challenging part, just wait, until the whole village starts sharing one bed. In your modern life, everyone has their bed. In your modern life, everyone has their bed. Some even have their pet just to snuggle with at night. But in a medieval village, sleep was a communal activity. But in a medieval village, sleep was a communal activity. Not because everyone was overly affectionate. Not because everyone was overly affectionate. You risked freezing to death. A single household might have 6 to 10 people. A single household might have 6 to 10 people. The only room in the house became a giant group bedroom. There was no such thing as personal space. Only one question mattered. Where's the least freezing spot left? You slept between your little sibling and your grandmother. At your feet, the family dog. Your head lay next to a blanket so thin that light still passed through it even if it had folded 3 times. Everyone lay lined up like dumplings waiting to be boiled. The good part, body heat traveled. One person warmed the next. The dog between your legs? It's a furry breathing furnace. You didn't love it, but you didn't push it away either. It turns out that it was better at retaining heat than you were. Your grandmother snored softly. Your father breathed like a bellows. The youngest kicked in every direction. Together they created a winter lullaby, chaotic but oddly comforting. Sometimes a guest came to sleep over. Everyone scooted over and made room. No one asked, "Is this okay?" Because every extra body was another source of heat. Another wall against the wind. Another breath in the icy dark. You used to think you needed personal space, but come January, when the wind howled through the thatched roof, you realized that survival depends on closeness. There was a saying, share the bed, share the warmth, a silent kind of love, but deep. One night you woke up to someone's foot in your face. You sat up and looked around. Everyone else was still sound asleep. You lay back down and scooted into your grandmother's arms. She tugged the blanket over you without waking you, like muscle memory. By day, people argued. By night, everyone huddled together. The children fell asleep early, curled like kittens. The adults stayed up longer, tending the fire, whispering. Some nights, you heard your father tell stories. Stories from when your grandfather was alive. Stories of the winter flood that drowned half the village. You imagined it as the fire crackled softly and drifted into sleep, your father's voice still playing in your mind. Group sleeping wasn't just about surviving. Group sleeping wasn't just about surviving. Each person was part of the family's giant living blanket. And when you woke up, your hand resting on someone's shoulder, your foot tangled with the dog's tail, you knew you still belonged here. Today, many people talk about loneliness. But in this tiny house, you were never alone. You were always touching someone, even if by accident, even if only in dreams. You learned how to sleep without rolling too far, how to keep your knees tucked to avoid kicking someone, how to share a single blanket without pulling it all away. And most of all, how do you make space for others without saying a word? You realize that medieval warmth didn't come from the fire, it came from people. And if you think sharing a bed with 6 people is crowded, wait until the entire village squeezes into one home on a freezing night. Some winter nights were so cold that people stopped considering your house versus mine. Because cold didn't just come from the wind or the frozen ground, it came from the feeling of being left alone in the dark. So the whole village came together. Maybe 5, maybe 7 clustered houses. One house had a fire still going. Another had a pot of porridge that was still hot. Another had a dry straw. Together, they created a temporary home. Not wide, not fancy, but warm. The elderly, the sick, the infants. They were given the center. The healthy slept on the edges. The children were tucked into the arms of grown-ups. You remember witnessing this as a child. That night, the roof was buried in snow. The wind sliced through the air like a knife. Your mother carried your baby sibling. Your father held the pot of porridge. Together, you all made your way to Uncle Hi's house, the one where the fire still burned strong. When you arrived, more than 10 people were gathered around the hearth. They scooted over to make space. Offered you part of a shared blanket. Tossed more ash onto the fire to trap the heat. You crawled into the middle, resting your cheek on your cousin's shoulder. You could feel her slow, steady heartbeat. At that moment, no one asked which house you were from. No one complained about the tight quarters. There was only breathing. The occasional clink of tongs stirred the coals, and whispers exchanged like lullabies. Back then, houses didn't have locks. No one hesitated to open their doors to someone in need. Because everyone understood, if you didn't open the door, the other person might not survive the night. You remember your grandmother once said, "A cold night isn't as frightening as a night when no one opens the door." That sentence stayed with you for life. And then you grew up, and it became your turn to open the door. You kept the fire going, warmed some water, laid out a rough cloth on the floor. One night, A neighbor knocked, clutching her feverish child. You opened the door without hesitation. The little boy was wrapped in blankets and placed close to the fire, sipping warmth back into his tiny body. His mother whispered a teary thank you. You only nodded, because you knew it was simply what anyone would have done. People in the village weren't rich in money, but they were rich in heart, and winter was the season when that richness became most visible. When you shared a fire, a pot of porridge, a breath of warmth, you felt humanity draw closer together. In fact, after nights like that, you remembered the names of everyone in the village, not because they were famous, but because they had once slept beside you. The next morning, as the sky lightened, everyone stirred. Some folded blankets. Some cleaned the ashes. Some ladled out the last of the porridge for the sick. No one lingered, but no one forgot. You learned the surviving winter wasn't just about fighting the cold. It was about learning to share the warmth. It was about learning to share the warmth. Didn't it feel suffocating? You smiled. Sure. It was tight. It was stuffy. But it's better stuffy than frozen. And when given the choice between the two, you always knew what you'd choose. You once slept in a kitchen corner with 20 other people. Just one tiny flame. Just one thin pot of watery porridge. But never, not once, did you feel alone. Because every cough, every shift, every accidental touch, it was proof you were not alone. You look back on those nights as a part of your childhood, filled with smoke, with muffled groans of restless sleep, with sleepy eyes nestled in straw and limbs, and you know, if you had to live through another winter like that, you would still open your door. Because warmth, truly, doesn't require much, just someone willing to share the same space. You've grown used to the cold, but hunger still makes you shiver each morning. When the frost settles deep and long, the fields empty, the greens stop growing, the roots stop coming, and the winter stores begin to run thin. You open the clay jar of millet. Just a thin layer clings to the bottom. You quoters, you glance at the basket of turnips hanging in the kitchen corner. 4 left. 3 are soft and bruised. No one says a word, but everyone knows. Hunger is lurking just behind the cold. Mix some millet flour with water and boil it into a thin porridge. The bowl steams, but it carries no smell. You scoop out small portions for each person. The children get the most. The elderly get enough to warm their bellies. The non-disabled quietly give up their share. Your mother smiles. A full child makes a warm mother. But you notice the way she watches the pot. That hungry, silent gaze. You promise yourself, tomorrow, you'll head to the forest, collect bark, scavenge leaves, forage for anything. Not for flavor, just for something to fill the belly. Cold can be fought with layers, but hunger, you can only endure. Sometimes, when one house runs out, they knock on the next. No one refuses. Because tomorrow, it might be you knocking. Winter hunger pulls people together. Not just for heat, but for kindness. One day, you saw the older woman next door bring over a handful of dried beans. She said, "These are the last of the season, for the little ones." You nearly cried. The beans were tough. They took forever to soften, but once boiled with a few slivers of turnip, the whole house smelled different. It smelled like gratitude. Winter meals weren't diverse. They were painfully repetitive. Turnips, then rutabagas, millet porridge, then oat porridge. And when even that ran out, just warm water with salt. Yet despite the monotony, mealtime remained sacred. Even a simple bowl of hot water carried the dignity of a banquet. Hunger couldn't steal the meaning of gathering to eat. You remember one afternoon vividly. The sky hung low, the color of wet ash. Wind clawed at the thatch roof above. Everyone sat close around the pot of boiling water. No one expected miracles, just warmth. Maybe a few strands of wild greens. It wasn't much, but it was enough. You stirred the pot gently, added a pinch of salt, and ladled it out with care. There were no complaints. No one turned away. Just the soft sound of slurping, a quiet, steady rhythm of survival. It was, in its own way, a symphony of thankfulness, performed by tired hands and hollow bellies. You once heard someone say, "Hunger teaches humility." At the time, you didn't fully understand, but you came to believe it. Hunger didn't turn people cruel. It didn't harden them. If anything, it softened them. It taught them how to share, even the smallest things, even when there was almost nothing to give. You remember splitting a potato in half. You gave the bigger piece to your little sibling and kept the smaller one for yourself. Not out of nobility, not for praise, but because the thought of them crying from hunger was too much. Hunger didn't just live in your stomach. It ached in your chest. There was a year when famine struck especially hard. A neighboring village, desperate and defeated, left their fields to scavenge the forest. They passed through your hamlet, gaunt and quiet, asking only for a sip of something warm. Their cheeks were hollow, eyes sunken, backs bent like tired branches in the wind. You didn't have much, no one did, but you still gave, just a little, a small ladle of broth, a crust of bread, enough to feel like you'd done something human, enough to remind yourself, and them, that you were still alive, still capable of kindness, even in the harshest season. Winter teaches many lessons. Some are cruel, others quiet, but the most important one is simple. When hunger and cold knock together at your door, don't shut them out. Don't harden your heart. Open it. Offer a place near the fire, a spoon from the pot, a reason to keep going. Because sometimes, hope is just a shared breath between two shivering bodies, a silent promise that, if we can just make it through this night, then maybe, just maybe, tomorrow will be warm. Winter doesn't come with lavish meals. There's no crusty bread, no fragrant roasted meat, and certainly no sweet desserts like the ones you see in paintings. But that doesn't make the meals meaningless. In winter, food is humble. Roots, dried grains, and a few sour pickled scraps left from autumn. White radishes, turnips, dried onions, millet, oats, black beans, and white beans are boiled again and again into stews, so soft they barely need chewing. Each household has one large pot, and that pot stays on the fire from morning until night. No one ever really washes it. They just keep adding. More water, a handful of grains, maybe some greens, and the soup continues. People jokingly call it the eternal soup pot. Today it might taste like radish. Tomorrow, beans. The day after, if fortune smiles, perhaps a tiny scrap of pork fat. It isn't delicious, but it keeps you going. You're still grateful. Every spoonful of warm porridge pushes back against the cold gnawing at your stomach. You remember once asking your mother, "Do we still have salt?" She nodded and handed you a pinch the size of your fingertip. You stirred it in carefully. The pot smelled warmer somehow. Your family ate in silence, but their faces softened. A little salt is a little life. One day, your uncle returned from the forest with dried mushrooms. You'd never seen the house so cheerful. Your mother soaked them, cooked them with oats, and added dried onions. The smell spread everywhere. The children cheered. You took a spoonful. It was warm, rich, almost joyful. Not because it tasted good, but because it was different. In winter, where every day is a loop of cold, fire, food, and more cold, even a small change in flavor can make your spirit rise again. You remember a year when your neighbors shared some pork fat. Your mother cut it into pinky-sized cubes and dropped it into the pot. That first spoonful, your lips gleamed with a thin layer of fat. You never forgot that moment. The meals weren't fancy, but they were full of care. Everyone got their fair share. No one took more than their part. You once saw your father, still hungry, quietly slide his portion to the youngest without saying a word. You read somewhere that there are two kinds of meals, a delicious and kind. Winter meals belong to the second kind. You wanted them to the judge meals. They feed your body and your heart. Adults usually eat less. Children are served more. The sick eat first. No one gives instructions. It just happens, quietly and naturally, as if the cold itself taught people how to care. These acts of generosity are as essential as the food itself. You once watched your grandmother break the last potato in half. Her hands were trembling, Her eyes were cloudy with age. Still, she gave you the bigger half. You didn't refuse. You ate it slowly, and silently. You promised yourself you'd go into the woods earlier the next morning to gather more. Winter meals were also when people talked. When your mouth is full, your mind slows down. When your stomach is warm, your heart feels safe. One evening, you asked your father, "What did we eat in the winters before?" He smiled and said, "Wild roots, tree bark, even grass roots." Your jaw dropped. He laughed and added, "As long as you live, it's fine." That sentence stayed with you. It became your winter motto. You didn't need to be full. You just needed something to chew, to swallow, to carry you forward one more hour, one more day, one more night. Sometimes you would stare into the steaming pot and see how the simplest things could feel sacred. Like plump millet grains, so scent of onion in steam, like your father's wooden spoon, smooth from years of use. Winter doesn't make people miserable. It shows you what's truly essential. And among all those things, a plain but kind meal, warm, shared, and enough, is magic. Tomorrow, maybe you'll find a fresh radish. Maybe someone will bring a gift. Or maybe, just maybe, today's porridge will give you the strength to go out and earn another bowl. Winter doesn't just freeze your hands and feet, it freezes your teeth. You used to think teeth were just for chewing. But in the medieval winter, your teeth were the first to tell you that your body was nearly freezing. Every yawn felt like a frozen nail had been driven into your gums. Your breath fogged in the air, but your teeth throbbed. Why? Because even the faintest moisture in your mouth stiffened in the cold. Everything tightened, even your jaw clenched without permission. You tried to bite into a raw turnip once. It felt like biting stone, hard, cold, and unkind. There was no toothpaste, no toothbrush. Most days you rinsed your mouth with warm water, if there was any. If not, you chewed minty leaves, scraped your tongue with a finger, and hoped for the best. Your teeth weren't white, but they weren't for show. They were survival tools. The man next door lost his lower teeth at 40. It took him half an hour to eat even a bowl of thin porridge. That thought stuck with you. So you learned to protect your teeth, chewing slowly, never rushing, and avoiding anything too hard. Even though cold made you grind them in your sleep, your mouth stayed dry. The wind was dry, the air, dry like cloth left by fire. Your food was porridge and boiled greens. You drank warm water when available, but most of the time, your lips cracked. Your tongue clung to the roof of your mouth like it had frozen there. You licked your lips once, then regretted it. The moisture vanished quicker than a promise in spring. You tried beeswax. Another time pig fat. Anything to stop the splitting. Your mother chuckled, calling it farmer's lip balm. You didn't mind. Anything to keep your body from surrendering to the sharp winter dryness. Still, you tried to speak gently. Winter made tempers short. Hunger, cold, itching, fatigue. They layered over each other. One harsh word was enough to snap something. So, you learned to stay quiet. Or speak softly. Because a warm word in winter meant as much as a warm spoonful of soup. You once saw your father and uncle nearly argue over how to divide firewood. The room was tense. But your mother calmly said, "Split one bundle now. Sort the rest tomorrow." Just like that, the mood changed. It wasn't just her words. It was how she said them. Calm cuts through cold. You understood then. A harsh word stretches winter longer. You didn't smile often. Your lips were too cracked. But you still tried to give closed-mouth grins to people you passed. Not showing your teeth. Just enough to say, "We're still here. Together." It was your way of keeping hope visible. You once found a funny bit of bark and handed it to your little sibling. They laughed. A bright, toothless grin with eyes full of light. And just for that moment, the cold lifted. Your mouth stayed dry, but your heart didn't, because love still passed between you in small ways. There were hugs, quiet hand squeezes, whispers shared beside the fire. You once lay beside your grandmother. She kissed your forehead and rasped, "It'll be warmer tomorrow." You knew she wasn't forecasting weather. She was handing you hope. You held on to that phrase like a shield against the biting cold. Every time your lips split or your teeth throbbed, you remembered it. It'll be warmer tomorrow. And somehow your chest felt brighter, because someone believed for you. And that made it easier to keep believing too. Even in silence, that voice whispered through the cold. 2020 tomorrow will be better than today. Waking up in medieval winter isn't just the start of a new day. It's the opening move in a new game of survival. No one gets through winter on good vibes and optimism alone. You make it through by strategy. Tiny moves, tiny choices, one after another from the moment your eyes open. You don't get up right away. First, you check your toes. If they still wiggle, you sigh in relief. Then you listen. Is the wind howling outside? If it is, you already know. Today will cost you more firewood. Cold air means more fuel, more work, more strain on the family. You don't have a planner, no chalkboard calendar above the hearth. But in your head, the day is already carved up by heat and human energy. Early morning means rekindling the fire, boiling water, and shaking out the straw bedding. That's how the day begins, whether you're ready or not. By midday, if it's not raining, you head out. You gather kindling, search for wild greens, and chip the ice off the doorframe. In the afternoon, you prep dinner, patch your torn sleeves, and boil extra water for the night. In the evening, you tend the fire and split food fairly. None of this has a name. You don't call it time management. You just know. If you don't do these things, people suffer. Everyone has a role. Your sibling gathers dried dung from the animal pen to use as fuel. You collect branches. Mother stirs the pot. Father mends the warped door. No task is grand, but none are optional. You've learned to think like a general, though your battlefield is made of turnips and firewood, not swords and shields. You can't burn all your kindling at once, no matter how cold. Spulling from Saul. You can't eat all the food today, even if you're starving. Everything must stretch. Everything must last. For tomorrow. That unpredictable, merciless tomorrow that might bring frost or thaw. You've counted the millet grains left in the sack. You've sliced one turnip into paper-thin pieces, hoping to flavor broth for 3 days. You've even faked fullness to give your sibling a bigger share. Not because you're stronger, but because they haven't learned yet. They still think winter ends tomorrow. You know better. Each tiny act is a move on the chessboard of survival. Like when you saw the old man hang torn trousers by the fire. Not to dry them, but to smoke out bedbugs. You started doing the same with your shirts. You saw your neighbor break twigs into equal lengths, setting them aside for timed burns. You learned to pace your fire, one stick at a time. Let the ashes fall. Only then feed it more. Fire is rationed like food, sparingly, precisely, wisely. Even sleep becomes strategic. You curl up next to someone with high body heat. You sleep on your side to trap warmth. You never roll suddenly. That leaks heat. Once, you tried going into the field early to look for tubers. Your grandmother stopped you. Morning wind bites the ears, she warned. She was right. Go too early, and you lose your strength for the whole day. When nature doesn't give second chances, mistakes cost you warmth, and sometimes more. You once forgot to close the door properly. The next morning, the cold had crept in. The fire had died, ashes scattered across the floor. Everyone shivered. No one scolded you, but you remembered. That kind of lesson doesn't need words. Winter teaches in silence. You don't feel wise, but you do feel sharper. You read signs, in the wind, in the fog on the walls, in the way the clouds move before sunset. You can tell which kind of wood to burn today, which direction the wind favors, which chore can wait, which one must be done now. You haven't become a philosopher, just someone harder to kill. And in this season, that's its own kind of brilliance, quiet, stubborn, and thoroughly earned. You remember what your grandfather once told you. Don't fight winter. Walk with it. You think about that line every single day, and each day you follow winter in your way, through routines, through habits, through little bits of cleverness. Because in the end, surviving winter doesn't require strength. It requires consistency. In the dead of winter, nothing is more precious than your hands. They're not just for doing, they're for feeling. for holding heat, for touching life. You wake up, pulling your fingers out from the cold straw bedding. 10 stiff digits, brittle as dry twigs, begging to remember warmth. You reach toward the hearth. The flame licks gently at your fingertips, and suddenly the blood remembers how to move again. Each day, your hands do everything. Tending the fire, peeling turnips, hauling water, sewing torn cloth, holding up the people you love. They're cracked, bleeding sometimes, calloused always. But you never complain. Because without your hands, you wouldn't survive this winter. You remember the coldest day of the year. You walked 30 steps to the well, and by the time you reached the rope bucket, your fingers were too numb to grip. Water splashed over. Your hands shook uncontrollably. You clenched your jaw, forced it done, then spent half an hour by the fire trying to bring them back. You've heard of people losing fingers in winters like this. Tiny cracks split wide between the knuckles. They bleed, ache, fester. There's no ointment, just ashes mixed with lard and clean cloth. You smear it on gently and hope for the best. You protect your hands with whatever you can find. At the start of winter, you cut up old clothes to make makeshift mittens. Ugly, ill-fitting, but better than bare skin. You move more slowly now, just to avoid tearing your skin again. Anytime you dip your hands in cold water, you take a deep breath, then move quickly. You can't afford for your hands to weaken. You need them. To chop wood, stir soup, stoke flames. Everyone is counting on your hands. Your mother's tremble now. Your father's crack open when he grips a knife. You don't want that for yourself. So each night, you sit by the fire, rub your hands with grease, and wrap them before sleeping. These hands of yours have cleared snow off the roof, dug through frozen dirt, carried your sibling across a patch of ice, clinging to a slick branch for balance. They're not strong hands, but they are relentless. They tell your whole story. You look at them now, bent fingers, darkened skin, thick nails, and you see a tale written without words, a tale of endurance, of care, of sacrifice. You remember when your siblings scraped their knee and you held them up. Your hands didn't shake, and just let night stake in Harz a major. Even as the wind whipped your face, even as the icy ground threatened to knock you down, you held on. And cabin tainer, and in animal inspire Farapel and Varmal. Another time, a glowing coal rolled too close to the straw mat. You grabbed it barehanded, a quick burn, a minor sting, but you saved the fire, saved the home. You never told anyone, because that's what your hands are for. They don't need praise, they just need warmth. You remember holding a baked potato straight from the coals. Its skin was blackened, its scent was rich. You peeled it open, held half in your aching palm, and felt your heart calm. You handed the other half to your mother. She took your hand, just for a second, but enough to remind you, these hands still have work to do, and you're ready. Because you don't live for yourself alone. You live with these hands, for your whole family, through every long and bitter day. Tomorrow you'll rise early again. Warm your fingers before lifting the pot. Because deep down, you know, if you can keep your hands working, you can keep this winter from winning. There's no calendar hanging in your house, no smartphone reminders, no alarm clocks buzzing. But somehow, every winter day still unfolds with the precision of a nobleman's pocket watch. You don't count days by numbers. You count them by actions, by the turnips left, the straw running low, or the salt running out. Your winter calendar is written in hunger, in calloused hands, in quiet glances toward the sky. Morning begins not with a rooster's cry, but with pale light slipping through the cracks in the walls. It's not quite dawn, just the snow reflecting silver. You sit up, feel for your shoes, and restart the fire. You pause to listen. Where's the wind blowing from today? If it comes from the east, it'll sting more sharply. If the air holds mist, it might be gentle enough to dry laundry. You take small cues from nature, your only weatherman. Then comes breakfast. Always simple. Thin millet porridge, warm but barely filling. You divide it carefully into 3 equal parts. You've done this so many times your hands move without thinking. Just enough for each person, not a drop wasted, not a spoonful too much. Then, if the wind softens by midday, you step outside. Not far, just enough to tend what needs tending. You gather dry twigs, check the fence, and peek into the chicken coop. You don't take on anything too heavy, not because you're lazy, but because winter forbids it. If you sweat, your shirt will dampen, and then the cold will slip through like a silent thief, stealing your warmth away. You've learned to work slowly, steadily, not out of weakness, but wisdom. Afternoon becomes your time to prepare. Rinse grains if there are any left, peel turnips, dry out straw, split kindling, patch up your sleeves. Children sit near the fire, whispering their prayers, because fingers are too numb to write them down. Evening falls gently. There are no screens, no bright lights, just family gathering around the fire. People share stories of ancestors, of the fox that stole chickens, of the broom made from the softest village straw. Flames flicker, breaths fall into rhythm. Laughter, when it comes, sounds small, but it matters deeply. Like the morning, the night ends quietly. You don't ask what day of the week it is. You only ask, is there enough firewood? Is there enough porridge? Will the fire last till Gaitan? Time here isn't a number or a date. It's a current, slow, constant, unbothered by your rushing thoughts. Each day is a note in winter's low and steady melody. No drum rolls, no finales, just a rhythm of keeping warm, staying alive, doing the same tasks again and again. There are few surprises, but one certainty. If you do what needs doing today, you'll do it again tomorrow. And if tomorrow comes, you've made it through one more night. That's enough. That's everything. When winter blankets the village, light becomes a luxury. You can't quite remember the last time the sun showed itself fully. Mornings are dull, midday is pale, evenings are gray, and nights stretch on without end. Light doesn't vanish completely. It just steps back, letting darkness cover half the day. You open your eyes and see nothing but soot-gray walls, faintly glowing from a pale beam that slips through the thatched roof. You grope for your tunic, stoke the fire, and sit beside its flicker. Just enough light to catch your reflection in the water bowl. The fire is your only lamp. There is no electricity. Candles are rare. Oil is rarer still. Even if you had them, they'd be saved for births, guests, or distant letters. So your eyes adjust to the dark. You move without thinking. You know the wall means the door is near. The breeze tells you where the hearth is. Children in the village play hide and seek in total darkness. No lights, no words, just feeling and reaching. Adults don't play, but they live the same way, navigating shadows with practiced grace. Your mother cooks without seeing. Your grandmother sews by memory. You sit by the fire, weaving cords without looking down. Your senses sharpen. You hear firewood pop and know its heat. You smell smoke and sense when it's fading. You feel someone's presence without needing to look. Darkness stops being a threat. It becomes your quiet companion, still, patient, and deep. And yet even so, sometimes you miss the presence of light. You miss how sunlight used to paint golden streaks on the floor. You miss warmth that came from the sky, not from the fire. One clear midday, you sat under the eaves. Pale sunlight, thin as watered milk, touched your outstretched hand. It lasted only minutes, but it felt like an embrace. That single moment warmed you the whole day. Everyone in the village understands. Sunlight is a gift, never a guarantee. You live in a season where darkness outweighs light, and you learn not to be afraid of it. Evening routines happen in firelight. Chores, meals, even births, all beneath the orange glow. You don't see faces, just long shadows on the walls. But that makes things feel closer, not farther. Less light, more presence. No distractions. You hear every word. You remember every voice. And sometimes you wonder, maybe losing modern light pulls people nearer. Maybe darkness makes space for connection. Darkness teaches you to listen, to feel what someone means, even without seeing them. You watch the embers flicker while your father tells you about the winter when he was 7. The sky stayed dark for 7 days. His mother kept the fire burning without rest. And he had one task. He had to keep the hearth glowing like the last leftover sun. You smile at the thought. There may be no sunlight outside, but the glow remains within. You shape memory through shadows, through voices shared beside the flames, through the quiet breathing of those curled nearby, asleep in the dark. Next, you don't fear the dark anymore, because you know, where there are people, and fire, and stories, it's never truly dark. Contrary to what you once believed, winter sunlight doesn't always bring hope. For a medieval peasant, a sunny day feels less like a blessing and more like a stern reminder. Darkness lets you hide. But light, no matter how faint, pulls you out of your straw nest and demands move, work, survive. This morning you woke because a strip of pale gold slipped through the wall slats. It wasn't warm, but it revealed every brittle straw clinging to your sleeve. You sighed, stretched, and knew, today's not a day for lingering. Sunlight gives you no excuse. It demands action, even before hunger does. You crawl out of the straw blanket, feet landing on the frozen floor. Every step feels like walking on stone, but there's no other option. You light the fire, though dry kindling is almost gone. You scrape together last night's ash, some broken twigs, and a few straw strands from the chicken coop. The flame flickers, small, unsure, just like your fingers. You boil water, reheat the porridge. No one else is up. But the light outside makes your loneliness feel purposeful. A few minutes later, your mother stirs. She carries a basket of mending scraps, dried yams, and a coat with a torn shoulder. "Let's fix this while the light lasts," she says softly. "Your little brother was coughing all night." You nod. You understand. Winter sunlight is brief. An early dawn fades early too. You sip the thin porridge. It's not tasty, but it warms your belly, just enough to face today's big task. You throw on your outermost layer, rough cloth padded with dry grass. It doesn't warm you much, but it cuts the wind. You head into the woods, alone, following the familiar path. Snow crunches beneath your feet, hard and crusted, mixed with frozen mud. The trees stand bare and still. You don't expect much. A few sticks, maybe a stubborn root clinging to icy dirt. But you persist, because sunny days are rare, and tomorrow might bring fog or hail. You've lived through a week with no light. Fires that won't start, damp air that dulls both spirit and strength. So now, when the sun shows itself, you act. Everyone does. When you return, your grandmother is outside, shaking straw beneath the light. Children sit by the eaves, warming their feet. Your father repositions a fence post bent by last week's storm. No one talks much, but all are moving. Each person knows this moment won't last. You tie your firewood into bundles, some for tonight, some to save. You patch the kitchen door, check the hearth ash, repack leaking thatch. As the sun lowers, your back tightens. Fingers go numb. Hunger whispers. Still, you boil water and restart the fire. Dinner is turnip porridge. Same as ever. Same smell, same bland taste. But tonight it feels more satisfying. Not because the food changed, but because you did. You worked under sunlight. You made progress. You carried your weight in this quiet, shared labor called survival. That changes how everything tastes. The last sunny day you remember was 2 weeks ago. You were sick then, curled beneath straw, shivering. You missed your chance to gather wood, to mend the roof. Then the rain came, and regret settled in your bones like cold. You swore not to waste another clear sky again. You've learned. Sunlight is not just warmth. It's opportunity. It's pressure. It's a silent test. You sit by the fire now, watching the flames dance in your family's eyes. Everyone is tired, but they speak, each one sharing what they did today, like a quiet tally at the end of a race. No one boasts, but there's peace in the air, a sense of pride, not loud, not shown, just felt. You don't smile, but your chest glows with quiet warmth, not from the fire, but from the knowledge that today, you gave what you could. You made the most of a rare, bright day. Tomorrow may be dark again, colder, harsher, but today you used the light to preserve life, and for now, that is enough. As winter drags on, you realize the most minor things, those seemingly meaningless bits, are what keep you tethered to life. Not grand feasts, not thick fur coats or blazing hearths, but small things. A piece of twine for hanging straw, a leftover spoonful of salt, or a twig found at the forest's edge. You remember the old string used to hang clothes by the fire. Every time your shirt is soaked with fog, you hook it there. A few hours later, dry again. Without that string, you'd sleep in damp clothes, and the cold would bite deep. You don't know who hung it there first, but now it's essential. Or the small wooden bowl, cracked at the rim, yet shaped perfectly for your hands. You use it every meal, a quiet ritual. One day you dropped it, and your heart dropped with it. That bowl isn't just for food. It holds porridge, hot water, a pinch of salt. It holds more than nourishment. It holds comfort. It's Salmaniafer. It holds continuity. It holds hope. You remember one day, near the fence, you found a few wild greens. Not many, but you stirred them into the pot, and the porridge turned reddish. Everyone noticed. Your mother smiled, for the first time in days. All because of that tiny change. You begin to treasure the smallest comforts, a sliver of morning sunlight, an old story from your grandmother, a handkerchief patched too many times. Because you know, life would be harder without even one of them. Every small thing makes the season more bearable. You once repaired your shoes with hemp twine. They weren't comfortable, but they kept your feet dry. You wove a straw hand pad with scraps, not pretty, but it spared your palms from freezing. You've learned how to stretch every resource. Radish peels become wipes. Hearth ash keeps bugs away. Nothing gets thrown away, because anything might save you, somehow, in some unexpected way. Village children carry smooth stones in their pockets. They toss them into the fire, then into their coats, little hot water bottles. You laughed at first, then tried it, and felt something warm in your chest. Once you found a button buried in the mud. You brought it home, gave it to your mother. She sewed it onto a coat you thought was beyond saving. Now it closes again. All because of a button. That's when you knew. Survival doesn't require something grand. Just enough small things to hold on. A warm welcome back at the door. A stick that burns longer than the rest. A wall that blocks a little more wind. A wordless hug before sleep. You don't keep a journal, but every small thing becomes a mental entry. A line, a marker, a reason to keep going another day. This spoon helps divide porridge fairly. This fabric came from my little brother's tunic. This scrap of wood protects my hand from the pot. Every item tells a story. Everything has a role. And in the dead of winter, these things remind you, you haven't given up. Each morning your eyes scan the room. What hasn't been used? What can be fixed? What still holds a little purpose? You no longer see objects as just objects. They're extensions of you, like limbs, like breath. And you know, as long as you care for the small things, they'll carry you one more day. Things are replaced in the blink of an eye in the modern world. A worn-out shirt? Toss it. A chipped bowl? Toss it. Old belongings you don't use anymore? Give them away. Or discard them without a second thought. But you, living through a medieval winter, don't have that kind of luxury. Every item in your home, no matter how small or worn, is kept. And not just kept to be used again, but kept to help you live again. Your way of thinking is simple. If it hasn't rotted, it still has value. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be useful. You remember watching your mother fold a torn burlap sack into 8 layers. She stitched it into a draft stopper to keep out the cold. Something others would have thrown away, she turned into something that kept warmth inside the house. That moment stayed with you. It changed how you see everything. You learned that value doesn't lie in perfection. It lies in adaptability. The pants you wear once belonged to your father. They were too short, too wide, worn thin. You trimmed the legs, stitched the waist, patched the fabric with scraps. It looked ragged, but it held together. That's what mattered. One time you found a bent piece of wood by the chicken coop, too warped to burn. But your father carved it into a coat hook. The first your home ever had. Now, you hang your cloak on it each night. It dries faster, keeps its shape, doesn't smell like smoke anymore. You thought to yourself, Maybe everything has a use if you just learn how to see it. Your home isn't large, earthen walls, thatched roof, one single door. But every corner tells a story of rebirth. A cracked pot becomes a scallion planter. Broken sandals become indoor slippers with tied string. A cleaning cloth tears. One half becomes a towel, the other wipes spoons. There is no such thing as trash. You begin to think of everything that way, even people. The elderly neighbor who can't walk still mends buttons for everyone. The blacksmith with a missing finger still forges hooks with ease. Your little brother, though small and often sick, lights fires more evenly than anyone else. No one is left behind. Because no one is judged by what they lack. Everyone is seen through what they can still do. Through the lens of usefulness. Through the lens of quiet contribution. You once saw a beggar knock from house to house. He wore a ragged coat, had missing teeth and eyes full of fatigue. Your mother gave him half a potato and invited him to sit by the fire. You watched him. He looked worn out, but then he began to speak. He told stories. His voice was soft and rhythmic. His words pulled everyone closer. You realized he wasn't someone to pity. He was someone to listen to, a living memory, a keeper of stories, a bearer of time. Something old, but still full of purpose, and deeply, undeniably valuable. If someone asked you, why not throw away old things? You'd answer, because I've survived thanks to them. The chipped cutting board from your grandmother's hands, the flickering oil lamp with only one level of brightness left, the same old tale told for the 100th time, but it never grew dull. They don't just fill space, they anchor you. They remind you that you've survived before, and you will again. One time you saved a broken roof plank after a repair. You didn't know why. But days later, when the cat gave birth by the hearth, you used it to shelter her kittens. You couldn't have predicted that, but that's what you've learned. The strength is in keeping things, in not discarding what doesn't shine, in not rejecting what still has life, in not abandoning what may yet serve. This isn't clutter. This is preparation. This is how your people endure. You look around your home. It isn't rich, but it's full of memory, full of second chances. Every corner, every object, every person is still here. Not because they were perfect, but because someone, at some point, chose to keep them, rather than let them go. Winter wind is unlike any wind you've ever known. It isn't just cold. It creeps into every crack in the wall, every fold in your clothes, every pore in your skin. It's quiet, persistent, and strangely good at making you want to stay quiet too. Even your breath feels like too much. When the wind howls for days, the whole village shrinks inward. People speak less. Children don't run outside. Laughter becomes rare. Greetings are hushed. You begin to realize that winter doesn't just freeze fingers and toes. It freezes the words you meant to say, the ones you never got around to. You remember one year when the wind howled for 3 days without stopping. Your grandmother didn't speak at all. She sat by the fire, rubbing her hands, eyes fixed on the flames. You asked, "Are you cold, Grandma?" She only nodded. You poured a cup of warm water and handed it to her. Nothing else was said. But in that nod and that cup you understood. Some things need no words. Your father was the same. Quiet all year, but in winter, nearly silent. Get firewood. Close the lid. Eat. Just 3 words. Not because he had nothing else to say, but because each word carried weight. In winter, every word feels sharp, like biting into frost. You once saw your mother biting her lip, not from anger, but from the sting of wind on her cheek as she blew on the fire. You moved closer. She turned and brushed your hair gently. That was her way of saying thank you. In your little earthen home, words were as precious as salt. Saved, used carefully, spoken when needed. This silence made every gesture matter more. You remember your little sibling crying after a fall. You said nothing. Just picked them up, sat by the fire, and handed over the last piece of bread. They stopped crying. No apology, no explanation, just the warmth of the hug. In winter, communication becomes the art of subtlety. No loudness, no show, just presence, just breath, just being near. You used to think you talked too much, but as the cold deepened, your words became fewer, softer, and slower. Not from sadness, but because you finally understood. Closeness doesn't need noise. You and your father once chopped wood together in silence. The axe echoed through the gray air. Neither of you said a word all afternoon. But when it was done, he placed a hand on your shoulder. That small touch warmed you more than any bowl of porridge. You realize some seasons don't need conversation. They just need presence, a shared task, a helping hand, someone quietly clearing the bowls when you're too tired. Cold winds teach you the value of silence, not a lonely silence, but a full one. Everyone holds unspoken thoughts in their chest. The wind outside already says plenty. It howls through the roof. It sifts through the walls. It whispers into your collar each time you step out. You don't need to add to it. You just need to sit close, share quiet, and listen together. Once, your grandmother told you, "When your grandfather and I were young, we often sat just like this, quiet." You asked, "Then how did you know he loved you?" She smiled and said, "Because he always sat by the fire and saved the only piece of meat in the stew for me." You smiled back. That's winter love. Not loud, but lasting. Not sweet, but deep. You don't write letters. You don't say "I love you." You rarely hug, but you pour water. You share firewood. You lay warm bedding for the elderly. You speak in the language that winter taught you. Quiet, but true. No fired bricks, no concrete, no thermal windows. The house you live in through medieval winter is built from rammed earth walls, a thatched straw roof, and a simple wooden frame. It might sound fragile, but it isn't. It's a quiet kind of fortress, built not of strength, but of stubborn care. The earth walls are thick, layered, tightly packed. Summer heat can't get in. Winter wind struggles to get through. You remember the early days of the season when your whole family patched the cracks. Clay mixed with chopped straw, pressed into gaps with bare hands, smoothed flat like ointment over wounds. Every crack was taken seriously. A single opening could let in enough cold to chill the entire house. You once spent a full afternoon patching behind the animal pen. Every time the wind rose, you paused to listen. A faint whistle meant a new breach. You didn't wait for the draft. You learned to stop the cold before it arrived. The roof above you is made of straw. Thick, rough, flammable. But laid properly, pressed tight, it holds warmth surprisingly well. You once helped your father replace every bundle. Up a bamboo ladder, straw in hand, weaving it layer by layer. Your hands were scratched, your eyes filled with dust. But that night, under the new roof, hearing the wind slide over it like waves against the shore, you knew it was worth it. Inside, the ceilings are low, the space is tight, you bow slightly at the door. Winter teaches humility, but that smallness is what holds heat. The hearth is central. It glows faintly, feeding warmth to every wall. Everyone sleeps around it, like spokes around a fire. A circle of breath, blankets, and quiet trust. Windows? Just small holes, covered with fabric, oil paper, or animal hide. Not for beauty, but survival. You don't look out for the view. You only hope wind doesn't find a way in. Once the paper tore. That night, cold stabbed your cheek like needles. At dawn, you patched it with goat hide. It was ugly, but it held. And in that moment, you understood what shelter really means. A home isn't built to impress. It's built to protect, to trap heat, to hold breath, to shield against wind. You once heard a story, 5 roofs torn off in a night storm. By morning, neighbors came. They patched, they supported. No one slept under the sky. Since then, homes are sacred. You look at your walls, cracked earth, hardened clay, dry straw stuffed between beams. You don't see poverty. You see effort. You see memory. You see survival written into every inch. You know this house can't stop all the cold, but it gives you a place to curl up and wait for light. It's a fortress without stone, a shelter without polish, built by hands, held together by patience, and when you press your palm to the cold wall, you feel it. It holds warmth, not in temperature, but in meaning. You're touching history. Built not from wealth, but from sweat and quiet, stubborn hope.
You don't have a down jacket.
No triple-layered wool sweater. No waterproof, windproof, weather-everything-proof coat. But you still have to survive the winter. And you do that by wearing everything you own, all at once. The first layer is linen, coarse but clean, keeping your skin from touching the thick outer fabric. You may not bathe every day, but you change your linen shirt weekly. Your mother always says, if you're not clean, the cold finds a way in faster. The second layer is wool, thick, patched, full of stories. Maybe it was once your father's. Maybe your sister stitched the sleeves together by candlelight. Every patch has a memory. The tear from when you fell on ice, the burn from a stray ember, the rip from rescuing a stuck cat. You look at the sweater and see a timeline of winter. Then comes the coat, not fine or noble, just longer, heavier, sometimes hide, sometimes oiled cloth. You wrap a scarf around your neck each morning, cut from an old shirt. Your mittens are rough cloth stuffed with dry grass. On your feet, hand-knitted socks in wooden clogs or cloth boots wrapped in leather. If it's too cold, you stuff extra straw inside. You look ridiculous, but you're warm. From the outside, you're a walking bundle of mismatched cloth. You move slowly but safely. You don't care how you look. You care that you're still breathing. You've worn 4 layers at once. It makes movement stiff, but your chest doesn't freeze when the wind bites. That's all that matters. One morning, you helped your little brother get dressed. He sat patiently as you wrapped him up like a rice cake. He giggled and asked, "How many layers now, brother?" You counted. 3. One more to go. Your mother added a scarf. Only his red nose and curious eyes peeked out. You hugged him, and somehow the warmth of the fabric passed into your chest. Kids in the village play a game. Who can wear the most layers? One wore 6, couldn't walk, just grinned in the corner. No one laughed. Because layering isn't silly, it's survival. If one layer fails, combine them all. And then you understand something. Alone, you're fragile. Together, you're strong. Just like people. One person can't keep the fire going all night. But if you sit close enough, together, you can outlast the longest winter. You've mended clothes by the fire before, needles slipping from your stiff hands, but you never stopped. Because one small hole is all the wind needs to slip in. You don't wish for new clothes. You only hope the old ones last until spring. As winter deepens, your clothes grow heavier. Extra patches, extra straw, extra lining, but you don't shed them. You layer them, like you layer your hope. You wear everything, the way you hold on to life. Bit by bit, over and over, stronger with each layer. And one day you stand in the courtyard, wind snapping against your coat like a flag. But you don't shiver, because you wear everything your family owns, and every stitch is sewn with resilience. You don't always have enough firewood. Some days the fire dies, the ashes cool, the orange glow disappears from the walls, and in those moments, the only thing you can rekindle is prayer. Not for miracles, but just enough to keep your spirit from cooling, the same way the hearth just did. You never studied scripture, you can't read holy books, but you know how to lift your face to the sky, close your eyes, and whisper something quietly. Not because you expect the heavens to answer, but because it warms something inside, because silence without hope feels colder than ice on your skin. You once saw your grandmother pray by the hearth every morning. Her hands were clasped, her eyes closed. You asked, "What are you praying for, Grandma?" She said softly, "Just asking the wind not to blow too hard today. No gold, no harvest, just a gentler breeze to keep the fire going." Since then, you do the same. Before heading into the woods, you whisper a line. Sometimes, "Let me find dry wood." Sometimes, "Let Dad's cough ease today." These prayers don't echo across valleys. They stay quiet inside you, like a coal tucked deep into ash, glowing, invisible, but lasting all day long. You once lived through a night with no fire left, nothing to burn. You and your sibling curled in the dark. Your mother placed a hand on her chest and closed her eyes. "Tomorrow will be milder," she whispered. You didn't know why she believed that, but somehow, you did too. And you slept. Not warm, but comforted. Winter prayers aren't loud. They don't happen in marble churches. They don't require robes or rituals. Just a still mind, a name to think of, a bit of hope. That's all it takes to keep going when the snow won't stop and the wind bites. You once sat alone in a frozen forest, hugging sticks to your chest. Your breath was white mist. Your legs ached. You whispered, "Let me have strength to carry this home." Then you stood and you walked. Not because your muscles grew stronger, but because the prayer reminded you why you started. Why do you keep moving, even when it hurts? Why not give in? Why, despite hunger and frost, do you still try? Your father once hung a plank on the wall. One word carved into it. Wait. You asked, wait for what? He didn't answer. But eventually, you understood. Wait for spring. Wait for sunlight. Wait for warmth. That word became its own prayer. One day, you carved your own word into a stick. Hold. Your hand was shaking. The fire was nearly out. The cold pressed in like a fist. But when you finished carving, something in you refused to let go. It wasn't a miracle. The stick didn't spark fire, but the act kept your grip firm. It reminded you that prayers don't need to change the world. Sometimes, they just need to change you. People in your village don't pray loudly, but they wrap scarves, they ladle soup, they mend broken sleeves, they pray with their hands, with what they give, not with hymns, but with habits. You once wrote a line in charcoal on your door. Everything will pass. The rain washed it away, but you remember it. That was your first written winter prayer, and even though it's gone, it still lives inside you. A winter night. No lights, no cars, nothing but the wind slipping through the walls and the quiet crackle of dying embers by the hearth. You lie wrapped in a straw blanket, a real one, made of tightly packed straw inside coarse cloth. It's not soft. It doesn't smell good, but it's all you have. Curled on your side, you press close to your sibling. Your shared breaths rise into the dark, fogging the last bit of cold air in the corners of the room. And then, slowly, you close your eyes and begin to dream. Not of anything grand, just warmth. Just a life a little easier than now. You dream of a full meal, of a coat without patches, of a morning where you don't have to fetch firewood. You've even woken up before, heart racing, thinking sunlight had come through the door, only to find it was just firelight flickering across the floor. But you never tell anyone. Because everyone has their own dreams. Your mother sometimes murmurs in her sleep, one night whispering, "Careful with the baby radishes." You guessed she was dreaming of cooking. Your father sleeps like a dropped bundle of straw, still and heavy, but sometimes his fingers twitch like he's splitting wood, even in dreams. Your little sibling once dreamed of speaking to the cat. You heard them mumble, "Don't run, I'll share some with you." You didn't wake them. You smiled, because you understood. In that dream, they were living in a gentler world. Dreams are gifts in winter. No one says it aloud, but everyone knows it. When the days are too cold, the nights become your only escape. A place without ice, without frost. You dream of green fields, of honey cakes, of your mother young again, of your father smiling more, of turning straw into down feathers, radishes into roasted meat, warm water into something sweet, like spiced cider. You wake up with your heart still racing, because even if it was only a dream, it made you feel alive. You don't share every dream, just the happy ones. Your grandmother once said, "Keep the good dreams, blow the bad ones into the ashes." You've done that, spooning ash around the door come morning. You don't know if it works, but your heart feels lighter when you do. The village children love telling dreams like stories. One dreamt of asking the moon man for firewood. Another rode a rooster to the next village to fetch bread. You sit quietly, listening. Dreams are like that, wild and borderless. They cost nothing. They belong to no one. And under your straw blanket, where every small movement makes it rustle like dry leaves, you feel like you can go anywhere. You once asked yourself, how do people survive winters like this? And one night, in half sleep, you understood. Because in dreams, they find hope. Straw warms the body. But dreams, they warm the soul. You don't wish for sweet dreams. You only wish for sleep. Because maybe, in that sleep, you'll catch an early glimpse of spring. You used to think a rooster's crow was nothing special, just background noise, a sound that happened every day. But in winter, when everything is frozen and still, that call cuts through the silence like a blade. It doesn't just wake you. It reminds you. Morning is near. You're still here. You open your eyes. It's still dark. But the crow means light is coming. And if light is coming, you've survived another night. That sound doesn't come from magic. It comes from a fragile bird, standing on one leg, feathers puffed against the cold, still rising, still calling, still insisting the day must begin. You remember seeing the rooster on the fence post, its beak trembling, feathers ruffled by wind, yet crowing loud. You didn't laugh. You felt something deeper. Respect. Because that crow was an act of resistance. While people still slept in straw and shadows, it was already declaring, the world has not ended. Each morning you hear not one but many. Their cries echo over rooftops, cutting across fog and frost. Some mornings the sound carries far. On others it's buried by wind. But still, you wait for it. Because that crow is your signal, not a schedule, a sign, a reason to get up. You remember the night the fire died. No more wood, no more warmth. Everyone curled up in silence. You stayed awake, not afraid of death but of despair. Then from far off a single rooster crowed. Your mother shifted slightly. Your father exhaled. No one spoke, but something lit up in every chest. You don't keep many chickens, but you know them all. Some have crooked legs, some missing feathers. But the rooster is always first to rise. One winter, the snow was too deep, and you let it sleep by the hearth. It didn't crow that night, but at dawn it found its voice again. And with it, you were reminded. The instinct to hope is stronger than the cold. That call is a reminder. The day begins whether you're ready or not. Time moves forward whether you agree or not. The light doesn't ask permission. It arrives. The rooster doesn't wait for comfort. It calls anyway. You learn to tell each crow apart. One is short and sharp, another stretches long, only to break off halfway. Each has its own rhythm, like morning greetings in different voices. You once played a game with your sibling. Which rooster will crow first today? They guessed right. They grinned wide. Even in the cold, there was laughter. You've heard that sound while walking deep in the forest. That familiar call, echoing through the trees, reminded you that home still exists, somewhere behind you. Once, you brought a rooster with you on a trade for salt. It still crowed at sunrise. That night, in a stranger's barn, the villagers startled. You just smiled. It doesn't know where it is. It only knows what to do. You wished you were like that too. No matter where you are, still remember to begin. Still rise. Still whisper to the world, keep going. That's what the rooster does. That's what its cry means to you now. Every morning when you hear it again, you stretch. You touch the cold ground. You start the fire. Not because the cold has ended, but because you've been called. A new day has come. The cry is your signal. That fleeting crow is proof that somewhere inside hope still lives. The rooster's call is only the prelude. After that comes your first step. You pull yourself from the straw blanket, your feet meeting frozen dirt. That first cold is your daily test. Will you stay curled up or rise? Do you shiver or do you move forward? Every time, you choose to step. Because that's what you can control, your response to a freezing day. The first step isn't out the door. It's the step past hesitation, past sting, past excuses. It's the step toward the hearth, toward ashes. You kneel beside the fire pit. You poke yesterday's ashes, blow gently. If a flicker of red glows back, warmth returns to your chest. If not, you begin again. Dry grass, turnip peels, kindling. Slowly, the fire begins. It's your second act, reigniting what has gone out. Then, you head to the back corner. The water waits, cold as needles. You don't splash anymore. You've learned. Now, you soak a cloth. Press it to your skin little by little. He's like shown no, as I have the back. The age of data becoming herdly replace the gruth you. First, you want to last them folks suppress. The step less, as a stress shide. You might be splashed anyone. You remember rushing once, splashing your whole face at once. Your head ached the whole day. Since then, You've moved slowly, carefully. No haste, no waste. Your father is usually the second to rise. His footsteps are heavy, but steady. You hear the soft scrape of his wooden clogs across the floor. That rhythm is familiar, like a quiet drumbeat. A reminder, we're alive today. Your mother's steps are slower but warmer. Each of her steps carries purpose. Setting the pot, checking the water, portioning the porridge. You once made a game of counting steps. 8 from bed to fire, 12 from hearth to door, 26 from door to fence. You know each dip in the dirt, each stone. Your steps remember everything. Last night's prints are still there. This morning your feet land inside them again, like picking up where you left off. Your younger sibling wakes last. Their footsteps are light, almost bouncing. They walk up to you, place a hand on your shoulder. No words, just their version of good morning. You like that gesture more than anything spoken. Your grandmother's steps are barely audible now, but every morning you hear them, tap, tap, tap. 3 careful beats across the floor. That sound means she's okay. And if she's okay, the house can be at peace. You smile quietly to yourself. You've fetched firewood at dawn. Before full light, gray skies, soft wind, the crunch of your footsteps breaking frost. You like that sound. It feels like cutting a path through the frozen night, clearing space for a new day to begin. One morning, you walked to the field through thick fog. You couldn't see far, but you didn't need to. You walked by memory, 30 steps to the fence, 10 more to the dried apple tree. You didn't get lost, because your steps carried the map. You place each step like someone writing a line of text, even, straight, purposeful. Each morning, you check the pen, the fence, the roof. Not from doubt, but because that's how you guard your world, how you hold things in place. Morning footsteps are like the first stamp on a letter. You press them into the own, and you say to the day, I am still here. After the first footsteps of the day, the next thing you long for is a bowl of something warm. It doesn't need to be delicious. It doesn't need to be much. It just needs to be hot enough to chase the cold out of your chest. That simple thing is called breakfast. Even if it's only half a bowl of thin porridge, it matters. You sit around the hearth, father, mother, sibling, grandmother. Is the old when she carries the night's chill. No one speaks at first. The fire is still weak, still waking up. The pot from last night sits on the iron grate, faintly warm. You take the ladle and stir gently. The wooden clink against the pot sounds like the first note of morning. The porridge isn't fragrant, but it's familiar. Rice with millet, a pinch of salt. If lucky, a bit of wild green or turnip. The mother divides it into even shares. No one eats first. You all wait. Not until hunger breaks patience, but until the bowl won't burn your mouth and still warms your belly. You hold the clay bowl with both hands, press it to your cheek. Warmth seeps into your skin. You breathe it in. Then you sip, slowly. No meat, no fat, no richness. But the warmth that slides from your throat to your stomach almost brings tears. You remember a morning when breakfast was only hot water and salt. Nothing more. But you all still sat together, shared evenly, and gave thanks before eating. That moment stayed with you. Your grandmother whispered, "The warmth inside you is what keeps you alive." You nodded, and you believed her. One morning your mother added wild chive leaves to the porridge. The taste changed. Everyone noticed, and that breakfast was remembered for weeks. Not because of flavor, but because it meant, we have a little extra. A winter breakfast is more than food. It's the moment the family sees each other for the first time that day. You notice who is pale, who is trembling, who is strong, who is tired. You once gave your share to your sibling. They said, "You should eat it." You lied. You said, "I already did." You hadn't, but it was necessary. A spoonful is a gesture of care. A bowl is a quiet vow. We're still alive, alive enough to share. One morning you hid a piece of dry bread in your sleeve. At breakfast you gave it to your grandmother. She looked at you for a long time, said nothing, just placed her hand on yours. That was, thank you. No words needed. You learned that breakfast is when forgiveness is easiest. Yesterday's arguments disappear into the smoke. Bitterness melts like salt into water. The day hasn't begun, but peace already has. You once wished for honey, for butter, for rich oats like the merchant spoke of. But part of you knew, if you had all those things, you might not treasure this humble bowl the way you do now. Because this isn't just porridge. It's shared breath. It's a glance that says, I understand. It's a small pause in the battle, a breath before the climb. After eating, everyone rises quietly. No one leaves leftovers. No one forgets to say, thank you. And as feet shuffle away from the hearth, toward another cold day, something inside you feels different, because you've been warmed. From within. In the heart of winter, where every breath feels like smoke, and every touch stings with cold, there's one thing more precious than fire. Laughter. You don't laugh every day. There aren't many reasons to joke when your hands tremble from hunger, and the straw in your bed starts to mold. But those little chuckles, those moments when someone snorts, giggles, or stifles a smile, become tiny flames that help preserve your humanity. You remember once carrying water and tripping over a rock. The bucket tipped, soaking your face and hair. You expected to be angry, but instead, you laughed. Your little sibling was already clutching their belly, unable to breathe from laughing. And for a minute, the cold vanished. That minute was round, clear, and weightless, like breath in the air. Your grandmother used to tell stories on still evenings. Not fairy tales, real memories. Real, funny, slightly embarrassing stories. She told you how your father once smeared mud on the roof, how she got teched by a chicken that mistook her hand for grain. Everyone laughed, not loud, but bright enough to make someone's cheeks turn pink. Each laugh was a reminder. You still had people to share stories with. And time. One day your mother made turnip cakes for the first time. The batter was too wet. The cakes came out lopsided. Everyone stared silently. Then your father said, "They look like my old shoes." The room erupted. Your mother blushed, then laughed too. The cakes weren't good, but that meal felt rich with joy. You learned something that day. Laughter doesn't fill the stomach, but it warms the heart. Children seem to laugh more easily. They shape snow, throw it, draw faces on frosted windows. You used to scold, "Don't get your hands wet." But then one morning, you saw a smiling face drawn on the glass. You couldn't bring yourself to wipe it away. You sat down and drew ears on it. Your sibling clapped. "It looks just like Dad," they said. You laughed. In winter wind, laughter carries farther than voices. And somehow, the wind makes space for it. You used to wonder, how can anyone laugh in winter? Then you understood. Because if you don't laugh, you'll cry. And crying is colder. Laughter says, "I'm not defeated." It says, "We're still here. We're still trying." It's the moment you stop just surviving and start living. You once burned the bread and laughed at yourself, the charred smell rising like smoke. You laughed again when you slipped on frost. Laughed when you called a chicken by the wrong name. You told the family. They laughed too. Not at you, with you. Because in that moment, you brought laughter back into the room, like you'd brought dry firewood, and it caught flame just as quickly. You realized then, one good laugh could carry warmth through the whole evening. That laughter rang out, rolled far, echoed softly, like a bell in your chest. It hummed in your bones. It kept you warm until morning. You used to think winter had only one color, gray, one feeling, cold. But as you lived through it, the season began to unfold. Beneath the gray, there were layers. You began to notice things. Winter had smells, the scent of smoke on clothes, dry straw, ash, withered turnips. Porridge salted just enough. Each smell became a marker, a signpost, a moment remembered. Then came the sounds, crackling wood, wind whistling through the doorframe, the soft shuffle of feet on frozen dirt, the steady breath of your family asleep by the fire, the clink of spoons scraping the bottom of a pot, a whispered prayer. Winter isn't silent, you realized. It whispers, quietly, constantly. You just hadn't listened long enough. And then, the colors revealed themselves. Not just ash gray, but the red-orange of fire. The brown yellow of a wool sweater, the pale green of wild herbs, the white of snow on the roof, sometimes golden light at noon. You once thought winter was something to endure, but it also teaches you to feel more deeply, to appreciate warmth, to treasure a shared blanket, a bowl of porridge, a held hand. Winter stretched time. Each hour became his own pilgrimage. No other season ever made you this aware of every moment. You counted gusts of wind slamming the wall, tracked curls of smoke rising from the hearth. You lived slowly, but deeply. You once touched your sibling's cheek while they slept. Their skin was cold, but their breath was steady. You didn't say anything. You didn't need to. They were here. You were here. The night would pass. That was enough. Winter slows everything down, but in the stillness, you see more clearly. You notice what you missed in warmer times. You see others. You see yourself. And you begin to understand. The cold isn't just a challenge. It's a way of drawing people closer together. Dia lean, no one survives this season alone. You lean on others. Others lean on you. A glance. A question. The sound of footsteps across the floor. Enough to say, I'm still here. Enough to remind someone they're not alone. You used to think winter was something that took time from you, but now you know. Winter gives time back. Time to feel what matters. Presence, perseverance, connection. Winter, for all its sharpness, is a season of truth. No one pretends to be warm. No one hides their weariness or their care. Everything shows, clear as your breath in the morning air. And when you look back, you realize you're not the same. You're stronger, but also softer, more attentive, more grateful. You've learned that winter isn't just about survival. It's a bell, a test, a quiet teacher, showing you how to live, not quickly, but slowly, not fearfully, but surely. You don't realize right away when winter ends. It doesn't leave with a final gust of wind or a thunderclap of farewell. It slips away, quiet, just like it came. One morning, you open your eyes and the light isn't gray. It's yellower, not bright, but no longer pale. You step outside. The straw on the roof has started to dry. Mice scurry quicker. Chickens flap with more life. No one says winter is over, but you feel it. Something has shifted. Your mother opens the door wider. Your father wears only 2 layers. Your grandmother boils porridge a little longer. She's warming the room now, not just the food. You lift your old coat and find the patch from last winter. A new tear has formed. You smile. Maybe it's time to sew a new one, or to let go of a layer. Children play outside now, laughing, splashing, chasing with bare hands. No fear of wet clothes or coughs. You sit by the hearth, watching the fire still burning. Not because of cold, but because it reminds you. You made it. You didn't survive just with soup or straw. You survived with people. With hands, with glances, with the little things no one talks about. You don't cheer. You exhale. Long, deep. And the breath doesn't mix with smoke anymore. It disappears into sunlight. You see a wild sprout pushing up from the dirt. Tiny, pale green, almost invisible. But you see it. You kneel and touch it. It's cold, but it's alive, just like you. Now close your eyes for a moment. The memory of that little fire still dances behind your lids. The thatched roof breathes softly with the wind. The wooden spoon has stopped clinking. Everything is still now, like ash after a long night. You've made it through the winter, and that's enough. No need to run into spring. Just breathe. Just feel your heartbeat slow, like footsteps settling into snow. You're still here, whole, unbroken, and finally at peace. Sleep now, the kind of sleep that needs no defense, no worry, no cold. Because now, the air has softened.